This episode of the Rebel podcast was recorded live at Make More Creative Studio at cSpace, King Edward on September 2nd, 2020, and it features multi-disciplinary artist Andy Moro during the 2020 Alberta Culture Days. Since we are live now. That was fun.
What?
That was awesome. We'll see how that goes. I just cut in the intro and realized that, literally, I was across the room from where I had to be when the intro started.
It seems wired for everything in here. Like, it feels like you got mics everywhere that there needs to be a mic, so it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's true. We're like 1 minute away from official launch time, so we'll just chill out,
sure,
and relax, and have a coffee. And
I got lucky. I went downstairs to get a coffee. Aroma? I'm new here.
Aroma.
And she was making a new pot, and she stuck my cup underneath the fresh. That's like hardcore fresh top of the pot action. Yeah, I'm happy.
That's like getting milk right from the cow.
I would love to do that someday. Is that a thing? Can you drink it right when it comes out?
So.
You must be able to.
Yeah. You don't have to pasteurize that if you don't want to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As long
It'd be a little weird, but
yeah, but as long as if the cow lives good, then right. As long as it's a healthy cow, you have to know the cow.
Yeah, you got to know the cow. You have to have a bit of a personal relationship with the cow to really go that far.
You don't just drink stranger cow milk.
No,
you don't know what that cow's been doing.
And what about the cow? Like, how weird would that be for the cow?
Seriously, like, who's this guy? Like, oh my God, he's drinking.
Excuse me, stranger danger.
Totally. Oh, good point. You know, it's funny. I'm doing a show with a company called Caravan Farm Theater, which is in Armstrong, near Armstrong, BC.
Oh,
have you
love
heard
it.
of them?
Yeah.
They're amazing. Like, it was my first. I met Estelle, who's running the place now, and she grew up on that farm. Like, she's single mom. She had a single mom who took her daughters out, like, to the bush and, like, learned horses. They learned guns. They learned, like, they can survive. Like, if shit goes down, they're good to go. Like, they're amazing. Awesome. And they're artists. Like, so we spent a few days there, my partner and I, and just got to hang out with horses. I'm a city. I came from, I've lived in cities all my life. So, but I really fell in love this year with horses, coming to Alberta and being here. And I did a video shoot a couple of years ago and met horses kind of live and in person for the first time, and it just blew my mind. Like,
wow.
Like the vibe from them is like, as everybody who knows horses knows. It was huge. So we got to spend time there, and it's like a huge horse. Like, they're doing shows with horses. The show we're doing next year is a horse opera, we're calling it.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, live horses on stage, like choreographed, sort of like really beautiful people who speak to horses, basically, and they can train them to do pretty much anything they want. So this is, anyway.
Oh, it's so cool.
That was my, like, farm life, primer. But it's just great out there. Like, it's when you can blend horses and cows and the bush and theater and good people. Like,
all of it together.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wicked. Well, we are now officially live.
All right. Let's do this.
All that stuff was, we were live before, but whatever.
Now we're really
we're super live.
I feel it.
I'm pretty excited. So first of all, welcome to the Rebel podcast. This is the first of the live cSpace sessions.
Awesome. This is an honor. Thank you.
And thank you. And with me today is Andy Moro, and I'll let you tell everybody about who you are and what you're doing. And it is so freaking cool.
Yeah.
So there's a chat bot. So this is a whole new thing for Rebel. Rebel is doing this live. So if you are listening, you can click on the link and go to, I think it's mixlr.com/rebel podcast, and there's text. So you can, like, shoot a text, you can ask a question, you can do stuff like that. And from now until we're done, please welcome to the show, Andy Moro.
Thanks. I can't tell. Like, first of all, I love your theme. Like, I feel like I should be Henry Rollins right now. Like, after that, like, is that you? Is that your music?
No, that's from my friend Emery Cords.
Awesome.
Local musician, and he's kick-ass.
Hopefully we meet someday. Yeah, that was
I'm
great.
sure you will.
Do I jump in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, and then you are doing some stuff specifically with cSpace for Alberta Culture Days, and I want to learn about that. I want to hear about all the other stuff that you're doing because you are a cool dude who also rides an amazing motorcycle.
You're a cool dude who rides an amazing motorcycle. Like that's our. I mean, we're brothers from other mothers. I think like it's there's something going on. But this is a great space. I'm really proud to be here. So I'm here. I've been invited into this building. You know, I'm new in Alberta, new in Calgary. Came out here with my partner, who's a writer. She's born and raised Albertan. Yeah. Her nation is from BC, but her mom came here, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, originally Lethbridge. So my partner grew up in Lethbridge, I guess 40 years ago. And then her folks moved to Innisfail. So we were Toronto-based. We're theater artists. We were doing our thing there. I have a son who went away to university, and then suddenly we weren't tied to Toronto. So we came out here to be closer to her folks. And that was about 3 or 4 years ago. Did a thing with High Performance Rodeo at that time. So we got a really great introduction to the community. And I'll tell you the truth, we weren't sure at that time if we were going to do Calgary or Edmonton. We just knew we were coming to be closer to Innisfail. And we did a show in Calgary and we did a show in Edmonton, and like no disrespect to our brothers and sisters in Edmonton, but Calgary really like grabbed our hearts hard. Yeah, it was great. And then she even was tweeting about keeping our company Article 11 in Calgary. Yeah, it was like it just blew our minds. And
that's so good.
Very dear friend Michelle Thrush, who we were working with, she's an actor, writer, performer, director, everything, lots of film and TV. She was just like, please, you guys, like, stay. And I'll tell you, I'll get to Wavelength in a second. But there's one other awesome thing that happened here that I just want to sort of do a shout out to, which was High Performance Rodeo, and Denise Clark did this thing called the Veronicas, which was their kind of beautiful answer to the Bettys, which, we all know those awards things, like when we win them, it's great, but when we don't, it feels a bit shitty, frankly. I can say shitty, right?
Yeah, you can. Of course you can.
You still have pride and you're happy for people who win, but it's always that thing when we're all working as hard as we can, and then somehow you just kind of like get a little bit of a knockdown if you don't get the prize. So what I loved about the Veronicas was that she did this thing where it was in the motel, and you get like 30 seconds to say all kinds of beautiful stuff about somebody in the business or in the industry that you respect and love. And so you just get up on stage, you talk as fast as you can, you say how awesome they are. They come up, everybody hugs, you get a pin, and you go home, and everybody so it was this real great love fest for people in the industry. So, as you know very well, like you've created an industry for yourself here, but clearly you made this. So we know you got to kind of carve your way to survive in the arts. And so it really moved us to see that. So then we were like, let's do Calgary. We're going to stay here.
Oh, so good. I'm so glad you did.
We are too, like, honestly. And it I've been here on tour a few times, but to be able to spend this amount of time, like I think we're into our 4th year now. So it's been great. And cSpace, we had a meeting at cSpace. I was working with Making Treaty 7. First place I came to in town was here. Really? The inaugural exhibition was happening. I guess it's in 2017. Terrence Houle was in that. Like, there's some really good work in that. Yeah. And so I walked into this building and just went, what the hell? Like, where am I? It felt like felt like paradise, frankly, this building. Yeah. And there was still, I think this studio was still, I remember coming up here and looking in the windows of these studios going like, man, I got to get to this place somehow. So I feel really excited to be here now and to be talking to you. But so, it's been a wild time, like the last few months. I work extensively as a designer, director. We have a theater company. I work as a visual artist. But things kind of stopped as they did for all of us. So, we made it through. I'm grateful for the CERB situation. It helped us survive through those few months when in live performance, there's still really nothing going on. Yeah. Having said that, we were just in Edmonton a couple nights ago, and the Citadel there they just did their first kind of live audience, which was great. Yeah,
it was good.
It was weird because people, it's like, but we work in Indigenous theater, so like a great Indigenous theater audience is usually about a third of the house, like with the exception of opening night. So it felt like a good Indigenous theater audience, which is a terrible thing to say. Like, people go see Indigenous theater, like just go. It's awesome. It's better than mainstream theater. But it was kind of like that. It was a very spread out audience, but the vibe and the people were so happy to be there and to be feeling human energy in a room, so that was great.
I miss it so much.
I know, it's huge. It's a big thing, and who knows what's going to happen. I have a brother who works in huge, like he does the big concerts with a company based in Montreal, but they have offices all over the place called Solotech. Yeah. And he said they've basically flatlined until this next spring. Like they don't expect anything to happen. God. So it's pretty crazy. Yeah. I miss it too. But anyway, so for that reason though, I was kind of like looking around to see what was going on. And our company has been doing this work where we're moving towards storytelling, but in a kind of a more autonomous setting. And we'd already started doing this. So to get away from the like sit down, watch a show, intermission at 9:15, go home at 10:30, whatever, you know, like it's great. It works. We do it, but we kind of wanted to open up the way that people experience performative work. So more like a gallery setting, fragment the story, different scenes happening simultaneously, stand around and watch whatever you want for as long as you want, kind of giving a level of sovereignty to the theater experience. Neat. Yeah, we started doing that work before. Yeah. So once pandemic hit and lockdown hit and new, kind of concerns and stipulations are in place, we sort of went, oh, well, actually that idea that we started developing works for this, because it's not 100 people sitting next to each other. It's more like when you're in a gallery and there's like 10 people and then you can barely tell anybody else is there and you're wandering around at your own pace. So we wanted to make work like that. So I was looking at the gallery scene for the first time kind of ever as a performance-based person. I haven't really, because I was looking at the gallery scene, this call came up for this Wavelength project.
Right. Yeah.
And it was at cSpace, which I already had my eye on. So I was like,
connect.
Well, and I read the proposal and I was like, is this just somebody's master's thesis of like the dream art project? I didn't think it was real. And of course it was. And I was a few days from the deadline to submit a proposal, and I did. And met with Dieter on the phone and had a great interview with the cSpace team, which is like just a bunch of geniuses up
dream
there.
Team.
Like, oh man, the stuff that happens in that room is crazy. So, and there's like 4 of them, and they're in a little cubicle and they're staring at each other all day long. And so like, you got to have love, you know, for that to work, honestly.
Oh my God.
And it does. So they're amazing, that office. So I did an application. I was on the road we were on our way to Caravan. I was going to Armstrong, and we pulled over in Canmore or something. And I did a Zoom interview in a parking lot in Canmore. Amazing. Well, my partner got me a coffee, and anyway, so it was great, and here we are. So this project, which is the brainchild of that team, is about looking at what this last period of time that I think has been really kind of introspective, or at the very least reflective for all of us.
Sure,
so the question that's being posed is what matters now. So have our priorities changed? Has our perception of who we are, what we do, why we do it, like you know, we've all heard that kind of the murmur around people saying how much more the arts are being appreciated now, that really that's what we have, you know, like when everything drops away, what's left? Our stories, you know, our ability to communicate with each other and our desire to communicate with each other. So this project really lands on that idea in terms of asking that question, what matters now, and asking that question through creative means. So so the project itself, which has a few different phases, I'll get more into that in a second, but it's calling for people to contribute their work in all kinds of different media. So there's a video version, there's drawing, painting, can be sculpture, can be some kind of an artifact. We're going to grab that work, interpret it, and put it into a kind of a curated space, like through the whole building, an exhibit that'll be on all floors at the end of September, on September 25th, 26th is when we open that. And then everything moves out. This is like Dieter, he's a maniac. Everything moves out to those cubes out front, which are gorgeous. And we do an installation using the work that's been submitted. We kind of reconfigure it, and then we're creating what he defines as lanterns. So those cubes are going to become glowing multimedia installations that will be there. So cool. I know. And they'll be there from October until April. So right through the winter, right through the solstice, which to me is like, that's the signifier for those things, is this kind of this glowing presence that speaks to what is important to us now. So those are the phases. I can go more into detail as we move forward, but it's just this big art kind of collective collaborative gathering of energy.
That is, it's fascinating and exciting. And I love that you're just uniquely positioned to do this and bring this to life. I'm curious how you became you. Like, how did you end up being the guy that you are today, doing the work that you're doing? Like, how does that happen?
That's a nice question. I mean, as we do, and when we're working creatively, like, it's that kind of weird combination of, like pursuing the thing that you see, like reacting to the stuff that comes to you, absorbing as much as you can from the good people that are around you, hopefully, and trying to turn it into something. So I feel like that's still happening. But what I know is that I started in visual arts, so I started as trying to, let me back up a little bit more. I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, which is a blue-collar town, great little city. Well. Do you? How come?
I grew up in Ajax, just outside of Toronto.
From the same part of the world. Yeah, so very industrial. My family is on that side of things. Like, we've been like lots of work at Chrysler's, lots of work. I spent many summers on the assembly line. Well, actually full years on the assembly line there. So it's a busy town, and it's a hardworking town. So I grew up in Windsor, and I somehow I was attracted to mostly kind of video and audio work as a young person, and there really wasn't a huge dialogue around what that means or what it is to be an artist. In fact, there's zero dialogue around that. At least within my family, there wasn't a lot of understanding or support about how that could be a thing. So I was really pushed away from that, and but I never was able to push it away inside myself. So it was a long period of time of just kind of trying to understand how or what that could be. Then I discovered WDET, which is a public radio station coming out of Detroit City, and suddenly I was hearing this music. Oh, and around the same time, Brave New Waves on CBC, which at that time was hosted by Brent Bambry, and it was like, oh, people are doing shit out there. Like, so suddenly it's like the history of the blues, and there's all kinds of jazz and contemporary jazz, and then on Brent's playing Talking Heads and Brian Eno and Robert Fripp, and those are kind of one group of guys, but a really amazing diversity of music. Captain Beefheart, like all that stuff, where you're just like, oh, people are making some wild shit out there. Like, this is real. Like, you can do this. So then I started just going down in the basement as a kid and just trying to make stuff during the night, and started developing that. Eventually somehow got myself into art school at the University of Windsor. That was great. I was working in the foundry there, kind of like, that our history in Windsor, like, so how do we turn what we know and what we've done, being on the line, working industrially. My dad's side of the family is Italian, so there wasn't really a lot of play. Like, play was like on Saturday we paved the backyard. Like, that was the fun. Hey! That was great. Can I do the rake? Whatever. Like, anyway, so somehow managed to get that stuff together, but when I went to art school, I was so excited to be in the studio. Like, I'm not even exaggerating, I moved into that studio, and in those days, like, we were smoking in class. Like, it was weird. Like, it was different.
I remember those days.
I remember those. It was a bit. So I did that. I slept on the cot in the nurses. There was like a little nurses room in the fine arts faculty in the University of Windsor, and I would sleep there. I would come out in the morning, and people would be like, because I didn't know that was a thing that you could do. So suddenly I'm surrounded by people who are just, all they're trying to do is make art. And to this day, I still can't believe that's a thing. Like, it's so good. Like, but so that was the beginning. Because I was so excited to be in the studio, I wasn't doing well in any of my other classes. So bless her, but my mother was like, well, if you're not going to be doing well in school, then you're going to have to be paying rent. Right. And I was like, well, if I'm going to pay rent, I'm not going to pay rent here. Why would I do that?
Sorry, Mom.
Sorry. So I went to Montreal, and I ended up landing in this house full of dancers, and
oh no.
Yeah, one of them I married, that was a whole other story. That's in next week's podcast. Love in art. But it was great, because then I really was truly in that community of people who just knew they were artists and knew how to do that.
And what a great place to land. I mean, Montreal is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's the best town. Like, in fact, not only, I developed a little bit of French there, and I'm actually just tonight, since I started this project here in cSpace, like I was working with some kids from Alliance Française. They have a summer camp, so we got some of those kids involved. And then I noticed they do classes, so I'm starting tonight. I'm doing conversational French tonight, just because I was like, yeah, man, I want to keep speaking French. So I know it's too good. Like, this place, like, do you ever, like, how do you leave? Like,
I know, I don't usually. My partner is just like, are you coming home tonight? I'm like, get there. Yeah. Sorry, Jen.
Oh, for real. So, went through art school, went to Montreal, discovered a lot more about kind of how people are doing that for a living. Yeah. Eventually, the partner that I got together with in Montreal, we went to Toronto. Neither of us were fluent in French, so really, what you can do there is limited until you're fluent. Came to Toronto. She started working with Toronto Dance Theatre, and I started working in film, doing graphics, doing titles and animation and film. Total fluke. Like, I wasn't quite there, but I knew I wanted it, so was able to start doing that. And in those days, I was like, I did title. I was working with Bruce McDonald, Adam McGowan. Like, those guys were just punks in those days. So they were at this little studio, not much bigger than where we are right now.
Awesome.
Doing there, and we had this other little room there was like a rostrum, which is the old kind of 16 millimeter. Steenbeck, which is an old 16 millimeter editing table. Bruce McDonald was kind of doing a sleepover version of his work in there. He was cutting roadkill, I think, at that time, and it was pretty awesome. So again, just amping up that presence of what that is to be an artist.
What a crucible to be forged in, right?
Yeah, well, it's nice to talk about it with you right now, because you kind of don't really clock that stuff as often as one should, like, especially when we're just kind of blindly trying to make our way through day to day and find something cool to do. But so that was great. So I came up through that. went to OCAD and I wanted to go back into the studio, went to OCAD for a couple of years. I was doing glass there. And so I just kept on doing multimedia stuff. I never really knew how this would ever come together. But then in this weird kind of wild, am I going too long?
No, dude, this is awesome. Don't you stop. This is great. We're going to be live all afternoon.
Let's talk. Speaking about sleeping over, this will be an all-night podcast. So I was doing glass blowing. I wanted to get into the foundry because that's what I was doing in Windsor.
Yeah.
Foundry was full, so they said, but you know what? There's casting in glass, so why don't you do hot glass and you can do some casting in there? And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's try some glass. So
crazy.
And I was doing some life drawing glass, and so one day I was in the glass studio with this guy Frank Cavaz. I haven't said his name for many years. He's somewhere in the States, but he and I were working, and he was one of those super out there guys doing everything like you. He just kind of went for it.
Yeah.
And so he was in the studio. I went in and started working with him, and the kilns were down that day. And the kiln is required to anneal the glass that you make so that it can exist in the real world. Right. Otherwise, it goes from 1300 degrees. When you throw an ice cube in a glass of water and it cracks? Yeah. That's what happens to glass if it just cools down at a regular pace. So you put it in the annealer, and it slowly brings it down to room temperature over at least 24 hours. Usually it's a couple of days, depending on the size of the piece. But so that it slowly works out all those tensions that come from being so hot and becoming so cold, and then your glass. So anyway, that day the annealers weren't working, which meant so we were still blowing glass, but we knew we couldn't keep anything that we were making. So no matter what we did, it was just gonna smash, which was awesome because then we're a little
freeing.
Totally, none of it mattered because it's such an object-based practice and suddenly there's not going to be an object. It's just process. So we had a great time. We were,
experimenting
totally, and making big stuff. And at one point, I remember, not only were we having a great time, I looked up and there was a crowd had gathered in the studio, and I was like, because we were having so much fun, that rarely happens.
Yeah.
Usually, there's stress, and there's a waiting. People are waiting to get in. So, but we didn't have any of that. So, when that happened, I realized we were doing a show, and I was like, oh, this is performance art,
shit,
which I had never had anything to do with. I mean, I was with a dance, I knew what performing was, but I hadn't been involved in anything like that.
Hadn't been on the other side of the audience
at all. And then we shortly after that, we were doing our kind of student sale, and I sold a couple pieces, which was awesome. But I remember watching my glass go out the door with somebody that I'd never met, and thought, I don't like where's my stuff going? Why? Where's it going to be? Can I see it again?
My kids.
Yeah. So. But I think those pieces came together, and I started to understand that something about what it was to be in that performative mode, and for the product to be the energy that we exchanged.
Yeah.
So that felt really exciting. So then I sort of made my way into the world of theater. I started as a bartender at Harbourfront in Toronto, and I got to know the technicians, and I was like, guys, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And they were like, why would you want to do this? I was like, I don't know, man, just please. So I started getting calls as a technician, and that was the beginning. So from there, I started to learn design and apply those rules that I learned in art school, and started to build a performance design kind of career. And that was great because it was you're dealing with sound, you're dealing with video, you're dealing with physical objects, you're doing sculpture, you're doing architecture, and there's poetry underneath it all. Yeah. And then people come together and enact stories in that world that you build. So it kind of really was a great way to bring those disciplines together. Wow. Man, you can make people talk, can't you? I don't think I've spoken this much. It's nice. But that was cool, was to find a way to bring those disciplines together. And that's what I loved about this project, the Wavelength project, is that it's that multidisciplinary, and I feel good in all of those areas. I really feel comfortable working with those media. And
it's in your bones, right? It's in your blood.
It's been part of my practice, and that's why I think buildings like this feel so exciting, because in addition to the nature of the range of people that are in here doing their thing, not only do you get to feel that because everybody in here, especially now, is taking a risk. There's no guarantees in this realm. None of us are drawing salaries. We're this is day to day, and you got to stay real and to make it happen. So there's that level of respect. There's just seeing everybody's awesome work, and then on top of it, there's the revitalization of this building. Yeah, which people like Dieter are at the helm of, and it's this repurposing and turning these spaces, which are very industrial, into something, even schools, into something that supports creative energy. That's not an easy task. So I really just have so much respect for what the space is on all the levels.
Totally. Yeah. When I first came here to see a friend of mine who was over at Newer, he was doing self-tape auditions, and I just absolutely fell in love with the place.
Yeah,
and that was a couple of years ago. And then a sandbox space came available. I'm just I'm in. And then a studio became available. I'm just I want in. And
so you were just using the sandbox desk, and then until the student, and then here you are.
Yeah, and it just all worked out. Because, I don't know, life and art and, the world all just kind of works that way.
Yeah.
If you pay attention to it, right?
That's like that's the kind of most important and hardest thing to really get a grip on is like trust that invisible thing, and somehow it'll keep delivering invisible things.
That's amazing. I love that.
You know what I mean? Like, honestly, like you really have to give over. Like, I was listening to Cecile
Cecile, yeah.
I heard, and she talked about that quickly off the top of her podcast, is saying, when I finally made the decision to give over to what I knew mattered to me the most, stuff just started happening. And I got it. Like, that's probably the most consistent thing you hear. Yeah, for real.
Gives me chills.
Yeah, every time. And that's from people who have taken that leap into what they dream of, it seems to work.
Yeah.
But I think there's some like mystery level of integrity and intent and honesty that you have to have in order for that to work. And it's a challenge. You got to keep that going. Yeah.
What, so when you, and I'm going to get back to Wavelength for a second here, because I think there's a really unique, what's the word I'm looking for? This program that you've so you pitched this idea, like how you're going to bring this to life. What's important to you about this process?
Yeah, I'm grateful for you to hear you say pitched, but really, I'm really trying hard to honor kind of the shell that was created by the cSpace team. Yeah. And I think that, there's another layer that I didn't mention earlier, which is, when I was in Toronto, I had the fortune of working with somebody and living with somebody at that time who was really engaged in community activation through the arts. Yeah. And so from her, and I was touring all the time in those days, and we became life partners, and she didn't like that I was never home, and clearly, and we had a child, so it was important for me to get back to just being at home, and I did, and we started a company there called Red Pepper Spectacle Arts, which is a community engagement company. So we were working on reserves up north, and there's a theater company on Manitoulin Island called Debauch-Majig, so we were working through Debauch and making these kind of relationships with northern reserves and taking these art engagement projects up north, and that's where I really learned how important it is to be listening more than talking, which is not what I'm doing right now. But I'm listening.
Yeah, but that's my role right now. You're doing great.
Thanks. Yeah. But really, especially when you go into a community, and if it's not a community that you helped create or spent your whole life in, it's important to make sure that the people who are there are frontlining. Yeah. And so I feel, as we talked about earlier, that because I've got some experience with most of the media that we're asking people to participate through, I feel comfortable facilitating it. I feel so much respect and pride to be in this space that really it's about just finding the best way to support the community that's here in expressing itself in the way that it already is. I feel like it really very much a catalyst in that way, as opposed to a creator. I think the level at which, especially Dieter has been encouraging me to kind of flex my own muscles on this project, is to help create the shell so that people's work, which of course is a priority of the whole project, that people's work is elevated and that people really are representing themselves in the best way they can. And if whatever I can do to support that and make that exciting for the people who are already creating the work, that's my role in this project, is to satisfy the desires, the big picture dreams of the cSpace team, but also in inviting people and encouraging people to participate. I'm really just trying to serve what's already happening in the best way that I can.
Well, I think that there's I'm just going to call this out because I left the door open on purpose so that we can hear the thrum in the world that is cSpace. But I think that this, to me, brings a really interesting concept of collaboration, which is, I think, what this project is about, really about how we collaborate as humans getting through these crazy times, collaborating for our future. And then, in the microcosm, how, you as an artist collaborating with cSpace, and, it just keeps going out and out and out. I just find it fascinating that you found your way here to do this work.
It feels like part of that magical thing where, during sort of the lockdown time, I don't want to say forced to, but had the great opportunity to just kind of return to my own studio practice, because that's what we could do during that time. So
for sure,
I went out to the garage, turned it into a sculpture studio, and just started making stuff. And it felt so good, and it felt so right and important to be doing that work, that I would think that might be connected to what we were talking about earlier, which is that thing where if you just trust it, it'll provide. And that sounds a little overly metaphysical, but it really seems to be a thing.
If you've been there and you've experienced it, it's not. It's like one of those things that just rings true, and you're like, yeah, invisible things doing invisible stuff.
Yeah, for real.
That's wicked. I want to. So after this project, what's next for you? Do you do you look further down the road?
Yeah, for sure.
What's your thing?
Our thing moving forward. Well, our company's called Article 11, so we're as was the case for all of us, especially in this place. We just watched our calendar become empty really quickly in the middle of March. So, and we had a nice year booked. So, really, some of that's starting to come back now. Where I'm really lucky to be. I've got a thing in Winnipeg that starts in December.
Great.
We're shooting a video. We're working with Downstage Theatre here. I don't even know if this has been announced yet, but we're doing a video version of one of the pieces that we've created called Dear Woman with a woman named Blackfoot, a woman named Cherish Blood, who's Blackfoot, is in Toronto right now, but she's from here. And so we're shooting that in a couple of weeks. And so that's going to be released as kind of this weird theater film hybrid piece. Because they want, Downstage want to start doing stuff. Clearly we can't, the gathering numbers aren't big enough yet to kind of make it work for opening a venue. And we're in a way, we're glad because it's really important us to be exploring these other ways of telling story that kind of, working from the energy of a performative piece, but taking it to different kinds of media or a different kind of use of space so that people can be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, that's wicked. And I want to give you a quick plug, andymoro.com.
Yeah.
Right? You can learn more about the stuff that's happening in your life and the things that you've done. And it's, that's a rabbit hole you can get lost in.
That's nice to say. Really, so far, that's mostly just theater stuff. Yeah. We've been doing sort of that, what I was talking about earlier, kind of shifting more into that installation work where there are live actors. Sometimes there's video presence, but we're still working with story. We're still building sets. We still have actors, but the audience kind of moves in their own way through those spaces. Yeah, nice. So we're doing more of that work. That's not on my site yet, but that's going to get up there shortly. That's great. And trying to work more in that direction.
Bookmark that.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you have social media stuff?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook just as I think I'm at _ Moro on Instagram and Facebook just by my name.
Awesome. When we so this is live, but later on it will be living in infamy forever and ever and ever. And I'll put show notes and all your links and stuff like that. What is your favorite story ever told?
Oh, jeez. You got to prep somebody for this. Favorite story ever told.
It doesn't have to be your favorite. It could be one of your top 5 stories. We'll take a bit of the pressure off.
Oh, this is so huge. I'm going to tell you this as like that story I just told about the glass thing.
Yeah.
Which, even though it's about me.
Yeah. I
love that story because it was a really genuine discovery time. So that's just that story of my life story.
No, that's great though.
But I really, that time really, that experience, that was 35 years ago or something like that. And I still feel like it was this morning. So that really mattered. And it was because I felt like I was being taught something by forces I didn't even know existed. So that really mattered to me. Oh, favorite story ever told. My favorite story was written by my partner, Tara Bagan, and it's a show that we just did in Victoria called The Ministry of Grace. Uh-huh. And I love it because she has taken facts from her own life and embellished them in a way that felt important to her, that she then went back to her family. It's about her grandmother who took off from their home reserve in the kind of lower Nicola Valley. Their Nakapmuk is the name of the people, and it's near Merritt. Their reserve's near Merritt. In the time when the kids were all being taken away by black robes, which is what happened to her mom, Tara's mom, Pauline Bagan, who now lives in Innisfail, who's coming to our house tomorrow, by the way, to help us unpack. We just moved yesterday. She's amazing. But she was taken away. Her and her brother were taken away to Kamloops, to the residential school in Kamloops. And her mom, it kind of broke her. So she left because who wants to stay in that empty shell of a place when everything that matters is gone? So she went south and... because there was a call for migrant workers in the States, California and so on. So she went down there and... She ended up being recruited by a traveling evangelical ministry because she could read, and somebody saw or heard her reading from the Bible, notified this traveling evangelical dude who found her and recruited her into his show as the tamed heathen, like this kind of Bible spewing savage.
Jesus.
Yeah, for real. So she was on stage as an attraction, and that's, like the power of the word, like you can picture the whole thing.
God.
Yeah, it's totally like yeah, exactly. It's all that stuff. So Tara wrote that story from what little historical information there was. And as is always the case in Indigenous storytelling, if there are real people involved, you have to go to them and you have to ask for permission to tell that story, which she did to her own family. And then, but nobody went with her, so there was really no historical record of what happened there, other than we knew she wrote letters. We knew, we knew the facts of the kind of core events that happened. But so Tara filled in the blanks and created this beautiful story about a woman who kind of wrote letters to the moon because she didn't know how to get them to her kids. Yeah,
my heart's breaking.
No, for real. And I've seen it. I worked on it. We designed. We just did the show, and I can't even tell the story to you now without choking up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Man.
So, but it's that level. So for her, I think the things that inspire me about it are on every level. What Tara's grandmother had to do just to survive, how her mother also had to live through that time of being separated from her closest loves and being in a place that she knew nothing about, couldn't speak her language, couldn't see her brother. We know what that legacy is now, or at least we should. If we don't, go look it up. And Kamloops is still there. But the amazing thing is, later in the story, her mom went away and studied nursing, and then went back to that school as a nurse.
Wow!
After doing all of her years of education in that school, then she went to Kingston, studied nursing, went back and became a nurse in that school because it was important to her that no kid was left uncared for in that place. So she went there, and ironically, Tara's sister was born there at that school, and they now are in Innisfil. They moved to Lethbridge and then Innisfil, but crazy big circle.
Wow.
That story, yeah. And then this many years later, here we are in a theater. Tara loves to tell the story of taking her mom to see a movie in Kamloops. I think it was in Kamloops that she had worked on. There's this great guitar player out of Six Nations called Derek Miller, and he was part of a story called, I think, Skyway 42, I think is the title of it. Anyway, Tara tells a great story of being with her mom in a theater that her mom wouldn't have been allowed to go to 50 years ago or 60 years ago, watching a film that her daughter wrote in that theater. So that one generation of development and advancement is so significant. And it's not the advancement that's significant, because that was always there. It's the degree to which people were prohibited from just existing in that system. So we're seeing some really important change now, and that's good. But that big pic, not just the kind of the story, the core of the story, which is the Ministry of Grace that Tara wrote, but the bigger pictures, the envelope that's in, which is the relationship between Tara and her mom, and kind of all of that, what that whole time and what that cycle has been so far. And it's still happening. We're still in it. Yeah.
Art is so important.
For real. Honestly,
it's so important.
Yeah. Man. It's nice. And so to circle this back to kind of what we're now understanding about exactly what you're saying, which is that that level of inspiration that we can get from story, is there anything else that even compares? Honestly, music, storytelling, that's our place, man. That's where we all meet, everywhere. Yeah. Especially music. We don't have to, we cannot even have learned the same languages and connect in that territory. So it's art and story is really at the heart of why, how, what, all of it, right?
Love it. Man. So thank you for that, by the way. That was
thanks for asking.
Amazing. Over the next couple weeks, you're busy man doing some stuff. Where can people sort of see this evolve? How does that play out? And I'm speaking specifically, just to backtrack to the 2020, Wavelength project. How can people connect with that? Can you give us some connective tissue?
Totally. Probably the best way to find us is at the brand new email address that I haven't even logged on to yet. It's that new. It's called wavelength@cspaceprojects.com.
Nice.
So that, I don't know if that's postable, and I'm just going to look up my own notes and make sure that I can't remember if it's a .com or .ca. So let me just make sure.
I will put it all in the show notes.
Great. So yeah, Wavelength at cSpaceprojects.com is the best way to just kind of say, hey, there is on the cSpace.com, you can find, there is information about Wavelength. There's a project brief. There's, for those of us who are in the building, you can find me on Basecamp, and I'll just send the information right to anybody who's here. But probably the Wavelength email address is the best way just to find me. And I can send out information about what the project is. And we're in the building evolving as we speak. But you're right, that's the tricky part about now, is that because A, not everybody's back at it quite fully, and B, even those who are, obviously we're dealing with all kinds of restrictions. So that sort of community arts model that I was talking about earlier we can't fully activate that. Normally I'd fill a room with paint and paper and get some pizzas and call people in and let's just make art all day long, but we can't. So it's kind of trying to find strategic ways to find people and meet with people. And that's why I'm really grateful to you for doing this, because anything that gets the word out to people right now is useful. So that we can kind of figure out a way in this time to customize an engagement, whatever it is. So, with those kids at Alliance Française, which I saw last week, where like the kids were there and they kind of had a little camp bubble happening. So I was able to talk about the project. I just left them with some materials, and those kids just painted their version of, and it worked because they were already there, and it was kind of like worked within the programming that they already created. So we're going to continue. We also have this thing that we're doing. We were in Sutuna the other day. There was a craft fair, which we got wind of. And so I hooked up with some youth, and there's a group there called the Napi Collective, I think they're based out of Siksika mostly, but they came down and we met in Sutuna, and there was this craft thing. We set up a little video. We did a video setup. And so people were able to just step in front of this backdrop and say what matters to them right now. So now we've got this video layer that we're going to continue. We'll be on Thursday night. There's Coco's being presented as an outdoor cinema thing on Thursday night. So we're going to be there doing the video and audio capture. So the exhibit itself, there's a visual layer, there's pieces hanging, there's an audio scape that's going to be playing throughout the whole thing, and then there's some video projection stations where we're going to see that content edited onto a big loop of people really just speaking life-size, projected onto plexiglass, talking about what matters to them now.
Oh, that is amazing. How exciting is it, and scary, to curate that, what could be an enormous body of work, but also an important one?
If it's like, my excitement is, I can't even describe how amazing it is to be doing this work. The only thing is, how do I do it now? And that's the real challenge. That's why I wake up in the morning going like, what the hell? Like, why now? Like, why are we locked out? So the challenge, we have to recognize challenges as kind of, mothers of invention, for lack of a better term. So how do we turn this into something that allows us to kind of gather and collaborate and commune around this idea in the best way? So it's really, the energy of this is trying to figure that out, is how do we actually engage as a community when we can't actually engage as a community? So creating that. So really, the more the better right now. Like I'm just doing as much outreach as I can to people who are in the building, people that I know in the larger community. Again, getting out to reserve so that we know that Indigenous voice is going to be kind of prioritized in this work, because we're on Indigenous land. So just really working hard to reach out to people who are already doing this work and saying, hey, people need to see this. People need to feel it. We need to know that it's happening. I wake up like that. It's like, we need that thing. If you go like, what is this? Is this it? Are we done? Is it going to get better? Where are And then you remember, people were there have been other pandemics. There were world wars. There were, I remember I saw a thing on Facebook where somebody's born in 1900, and by the time they're 50, they've been through 2 world wars and a couple of pandemics, and you go like, okay, they made it through. They got
settle down.
Totally. And one of the things that unites people through all of those times, Russian Revolution, like all these major upheaval moments, is that core of art.
Absolutely.
And that's what, whether it's poetry, whether it's music, we hear those things, and we can attach them to those tumultuous times and understand what people are dealing with. So hopefully we can a little bit kind of like tap into that wavelength on this one.
Yeah. Man, this has been really inspiring. And I'm not done with you yet.
All right.
Who's your favorite band?
Oh, there's so many.
I ask all the tough questions.
You do. I don't have a favorite band. I really but I do have. Okay, I take that back. Right now,
Yeah.
the thing I'm if the what you're listening to the most is your favorite, then I would say right now it's just Kendrick Lamar. Like I'm all over that dude. Like everything he says and does is gold to me.
Right on.
Maybe one of the greatest artists. For sure, the 21st century, maybe even the 20th. Like,
damn.
So he's up at the top, but I'm all about Son House. I'm huge on John Lee Hooker, Jack White. I've been listening to for the last couple of days. Pretty solid.
Brilliant.
Like honestly, and then I started listening to some of the old White Stripes stuff, which I haven't done for a while, and like hearing that Zeppelin riff he's doing, but contemporizing it like in a way that makes me happy because those and I'm a big Zeppelin fan too, but those guys really just took Black American blues and won with it. Like they made money. Thankfully, they grabbed a couple guys that brought them forward as they got huge, but still, we just watched that amazing James Brown documentary last night. So
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, the film is. I really enjoyed it. There's some issues with it, but it was really great to watch. But so re-listening to him, so yeah, all kinds of soul, all kinds of funk. I'm on NPR Tiny Desk Concert all day long. Like if I'm at work, that's what's on in my studio, just because you get a visual, you get people. It's a little bit more of a casual environment. It's awesome. So yeah, no, music is like it doesn't stop. I'm always listening to something, but. Yeah, I'm really into Kendrick Lamar.
Not apropos of anything that we've talked about. What are the 5 things that people need to know about walking this earth?
Oh man, you're hardcore. Yeah, it's like you can go. There's the best thing to look at is the 7 grandfather teachings, which are mostly an Anishinaabe thing, but there are lots of different communities that have versions of them. And there also are variations of what those teachings are, but there's some variation on kindness, courage, integrity, bravery, love, and name another one. I don't know how many I just said.
Yeah, you over 5.
Yeah. So, and there are 7 of them, but they do vary, and it really is about. I think it's really about being your truest and most honest and humility. That's the big one. It's funny to forget that because really that to me feels like the priority is, being strong and humble at the same time. And I'm not saying I do it. I'm just saying I know it's important. Because that allows us to receive what we need to receive. So if we can find the balance, honestly, if we can get any 3 of those 7 teachings going at once, we're doing great.
Right on.
But within those 7 grandfather teachings, and that's searchable. And like I said, there are a few variations, but the gist of it is the same, which is be true, be sincere, be strong, have courage, fight for what you believe in, defend your innocence and your love and your honesty and your truth, and try and hear that and avoiding ego. Well, as artists, obviously we have to go to that ego place, which allows us to know who we are and why we have something to say, but also like back burner that, let the message do the work and not the medium.
Well, that's awesome. There's something about this is not the typical Rebel show, but it's pretty close. And the one thing I love to ask people is, there's these people out there that are wondering how to take the next step or how to do this next thing. Maybe it's to be an artist, maybe it's to be a musician, maybe it's to be the captain of industry. I don't know. I call them rebels in waiting. They're just kind of trying to figure stuff out. What advice would you give to them to help them on their way?
I'm going to say, I don't even think it's a them. I feel like a rebel in waiting most of the time because, and it's nice to talk to you because, at least as we get, I'm pushing grays out all day long. Like I'm in my mid 50s now. So sometimes we forget to look back and go like, oh, holy shit, I think I was doing something on purpose there. Maybe it didn't feel like it at the time, but as you start to see those things kind of as a life, as an energy, as a desire, then you start to recognize, okay, this is a real thing. Like I need to hear and believe in this. I think that's really what it comes down to is all of those things. And it's what I keep trying to remind myself every single day is go to the heart, just like go to that deep heart truth. Yeah. Man, we're only shuffling around this place for a pretty short time. Like we really have to do everything we can. And this isn't by example, this is by desire to just get our true self out there in the best way and in the most sincere way. There's a lot of people are getting really rich and famous doing ugly stuff, and that can be misleading and deceiving. And we have to recognize that the true wealth is not what we're driving, but who we are and how we share and what we give. Amazing. I think that's probably the biggest thing is that your wealth is in how much you give, not in how much you have. And I think that's probably so remember to just keep it coming out, keep it going.
I love that so much. And that, sir, I couldn't have asked for a better way to tie this thing up. You have been an absolute pleasure to sit across from. I plan on having these live podcasts regularly. I'd love for you to come back in any time that we're doing them, sit down and talk about where you're at in the process and what's happening next.
Well, the honor's mine, man. I think what you're doing here is remarkable, and I'm really proud to have met you and to be in the same kind of edifice as you for this period of time. And man, I'd love to come back. I feel really, really happy about meeting you and what you're doing and excited about it.
And we'll go for a motorcycle ride before it snows.
Yeah, I was on the edge this morning. I was like, oh yeah, cool. My eyes are wide, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, let's do that.
Awesome. Andy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, brother.
You can find out more about every one of our guests in the show notes at therebelrebelpodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe to The Rebel Rebel wherever you get your favorite podcasts. I'm your host, Michael Dargy. Thank you so much for listening.